It was a typical day in May 1977 where a 20-year-old woman by the name of Colleen Stan was hitchhiking. She was an experienced hitchhiker, and on this particular day, she trusted her intuition and let two cars pass before entering a blue van. She chose this van because there was a mother and a baby inside in addition to the father driving. They just looked like a typical friendly family. When she boarded the van, it took a stop at the gas station where she went to go to the restroom. It was during this time an inner voice in Colleen's head was telling her to run away from the van as far as she can. She brushed these voices off as being irrational fears and once again boarded the van. Little did she know that little warning in her head was indeed foreboding and quite authentic. When the van began driving again, it suddenly pulled off the highway and the driver, named Cameron Hooker, put a knife to her throat and subsequently kidnapped her. Cameron and his wife Janice had made an agreement that he was allowed to have a slave for his sexual fantasies, which he acted on Colleen the very first night of her kidnapping. He was inspired to do this by a French film called The Story of O. He abused her every way possible and then kept her in a box for 23 hours every day, addressing her by a code name called K. For survival, she ate scraps of food. The next year, Colleen was forced to sign a contract which stated that she will be his slave for life and that he controls her body and her soul. He was constantly testing his dominance over her, and there was even a point where he handed her a gun. She had no idea if this gun was loaded or not, but he instructed her to open her mouth and put the gun in it and pull the trigger. She listened to him, and it was only after she did all of that she realized it wasn't loaded. In order to instill fear in her, Cameron told Colleen every day that she was being watched by a dangerous organization called the Company, and that if she ever tried to escape, they would hurt her and her family. Colleen obliged to his every command, which rewarded her the freedom to jog outside and also be a caretaker for the family's kids. She was even allowed to visit her family twice, once alone and once with Cameron pretending to be her boyfriend. Interestingly, during none of those times did Colleen make any attempt to escape. I'm guessing that the constant threat and reinforcement of the so-called Company is what caused her to not escape during any of those times. When Cameron began worrying that he had given her too much freedom, he once again decided to lock her up in the wooden box for 23 hours a day, taking her out every night to torture her and give her food. Can you imagine being placed in a box for 23 hours every day for years? The lack of air, the darkness, the ability to not even hear anything at all. It was probably reminiscent to being dead. Finally, in 1983, Cameron allowed Colleen, who was now 29 years old, to work as a maid at a motel and wanted to make her his second wife. Janice, the first wife, confessed to Colleen that the Company did exist, but Cameron was not associated with it at all, and they both needed to escape Cameron, as she too had been abused long-term by him. When Colleen went to the bus station, she called it quits with Cameron and went back home. She didn't report Cameron to the police, and she still continued to keep contact with him because, upon Janice's request, she wanted to change Cameron. It wasn't until 3 months later did Janice call the police and let them know what her husband did to Colleen, and also let them know that he had previously kidnapped and murdered another person by the name of Marie Elizabeth Spinaki in 1976, though the remains of this individual were never found, and as such no charges were brought upon him for this case. During trial, in order to have full immunity, Janice testified against her husband, who was finally charged with 104 counts of violent and sexual assaults and kidnappings. Meanwhile, Colleen went on with her life and tried to live normally after years and years of therapy, albeit it was understandably difficult for her to keep relationships. She works as an office manager currently. Meanwhile, Janice changed her name and works in the mental health realm, specifically becoming a social worker. Although the two haven't spoke to each other ever since, Janice had expressed guilt, though Colleen understands that it wasn't her fault and wants to reconnect with her again, acknowledging that it was Janice who actually saved her. Upon hearing this case, I was sick to my stomach and shocked at how someone can be kidnapped for 7 years, be physically and psychologically abused, all the while being kept in a wooden box underneath some stranger's bed. It's important to note the power of psychology in cases like this because even though Colleen had several instances where she could have reported him and even escaped, she never did because of the control and fear that Cameron held over her, and the fact that he made her believe that there was a so-called organization organization called the Company that was watching her every move. It is believed that the Company was a crossbreed between crime mob slavery and the strong surveillance idea that comes from the 1984 story of Big Brother. When Colleen finally managed to leave on her own terms, she still didn't report him because of the emotional and psychological connection Cameron established between the two of them. Janice, who was also brainwashed by him for 18 years, finally woke up and reported this monster. In my opinion, Janice is actually a hero because she not only reported and testified against him, but she also told the truth to Colleen regarding the nonsense he was forcing them to believe. People might wonder why it took her that long to report him, but I do believe she was sincere, and like Colleen, she was also a victim and psychologically controlled and abused by Cameron. This case was truly intriguing, and I really want to know what you guys think about all of this in the comments section below, because this is a very discussion-demanding topic. I mean, I still can't believe this all happened in real life. I want to thank you all for watching, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting content.